All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the Charter Cities Institute's Digital Roundtable. These digital roundtables seek to promote conversation and provide introductions among relevant stakeholders who are engaged in some facet of city development in Africa, including but not limited to investing, building, hosting, and governing. Today we have Ennovate Lab to discuss cities as innovation hubs. We'll start with a round of introductions. My name is Carl Peterson. I am the Senior Manager for Special Projects at the Charter Cities Institute. When I call your name, please go ahead and tell us who you are, your institution, and your role there. So I'll go ahead and start with Siska.
Hello, everyone. I'm Siska, and I work with Carl at CCI and partnerships.
Great. JD.
Right. I'm Jesudamilare Adesegun-David. I lead Ennovate Lab, an innovation hub in Obomoso, Nigeria.
Awesome. Heba.
My name is Heba. I am the Chief of Staff and a researcher at Africa Urban Lab here in the Africa School of Economics and Zanzibar.
Great. Angelo.
Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. My name's Angelo. I'm the founder of Build Cities, and we're a platform for economic development.
Great. Debo.
Yeah, good day, everyone. My name is Debo. I represent Velocity Development Limited.
Awesome. I think I have on my screen here just a Zanzibar startup.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good day, wherever you are around the world. My name is Ikram Sorada. I'm representing the Zanzibar Startup Association.
Awesome. Coco.
Hi, nice to meet everyone. I'm Coco. I run operations and experience at Itana.
Great. Nella.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nella Andamoa. I'm head of policy at Titania as well, special economic zone in Nigeria.
Awesome. And then I have Rose.
So Rose had sent us a message in the chat. Hi, I'm Rose. I'm a venture builder at Startup Africa Venture Studio.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I think with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to JD. We look forward to this discussion.
Hello, everyone. So it's such a pleasure to be sharing with us today. I'm going to be talking about cities as innovation hubs, particularly exploring place-anchored funds, serendipity engines, and ecosystems of resilience. So we have a quote by Diane Eshno. She said, by the year 2050, we're going to have to fit another 2.5 billion people into the cities. And so that's both an opportunity and, a threat, right? The idea that we're having, about 1/4 of the world's population migrating into cities within the next 25 years, that's huge potential in terms of, the kind of things that we could do in preparation. But at the same time, it poses a significant threat if we are not prepared, right? Because we already understand what overpopulation, is doing in cities, the strain on infrastructure, the quality of life, dipping, and all of that. And so the idea of this amount of people, migrating to cities could be very, devastating if we are not prepared for such an influx. And that's why this conversation is very important, and what Charter Cities Institute is doing is quite important. The idea that we need to build new cities and at the same time, strengthen, already existing cities, like rethink them, right? Reframe them and, enable them transition into the spaces they ought to be. And so I'm just going to share two definitions, that kind of draw from the title I'm speaking about today. First, the definition of cities. So Michael Crane had this, fusion of definitions that led to his definition. He said cities are relatively large, dense, and heterogeneous human settlements featuring complex social structure and institutions, resulting in cultural production extending beyond its boundaries, right? So the idea is there is this density, there is this, expanse, there is this heterogeneity that mark cities, right? That kind of define them. There is complexity. It is not as simple as village life, would be. And so the approach to cities must take into consideration all of these, complexities within it. And then the next definition will be that of innovation hubs. So I got this from Nesta. So Nesta said innovation hubs are spaces and places which bring people together to learn, share, and collaborate. So if we actually just take away innovation hubs and put cities in place of innovation hubs, I mean, the definition still holds very true. We could also say that cities are basically places that bring people together to learn, share, collaborate, work, live, and all of that. But going on with the definition for innovation hubs, they are much more than shared workspaces. They are places where social entrepreneurs, community activists, nonprofits, and others can come together to share ideas, insights, and experiences. In this way, hubs provide mutual support. They also provide economies of scale and scope. Uh, Basically, this is something that cities also provide, economies of scale. The reason why cities are what they are is because there is this density of people, right, that would form a customer base, for whatever project you're trying to, kickstart. And cities give you this diversity, this variety of people that you could share passions with, right? So it's in cities you find people who have esoteric hobbies just like you have, right? Because there is just that, abundance of people that allow for these subsets of, people that share such, hobbies as you have, you can find them there. So they provide economies of scale and scope as hub members share associated costs, overheads, meeting rooms, connectivity, and so on. So that's by Nesta. So the question now is, what does this lead us into? What is this, kind of like bringing before us as something to catch our attention? Africa needs great cities, right? And we need to start rethinking how we approach the building of cities, not so much as political entities or constructs, but even much more as economic constructs, right? And for Africa to build these kinds of cities, we need visionary leadership committed to place over long periods of time. So I was on a bus trip to Kivu in Rwanda. So we're traveling from Kigali to Kivu, and so I sat with Brandon Pascal of the Launch Lab in Stellenbosch University, and we're talking about cities. And then I asked him, what does it take to build great cities? Because he had kind of like just told me about Stellenbosch and how Stellenbosch was an emergent, not necessarily emergent, but it was a very small place, but it was pulling far above, its weight in terms of the economic outcomes for Stellenbosch as a city. And then he made a statement which was quite profound, and it was profound also because this was a similar statement that Paul Graham had made. Paul Graham has an essay around cities and ambitions, right? He said, every great city has a story, right? It has a message, and ambitious people would actually migrate towards that, And so Brandon told me, he said, to build a great city, what you need to do is to attract very smart people and retain them there. And that kind of like was profound, because the attraction of smart people would lead to a virtuous cycle. Because when smart people congregate somewhere, they actually attract more smart people, and then you see people do things, right? Within these spaces. One of the things that I think needs to be added to that is the commitment to these places over long periods of time. If we want to build great cities in Africa, we need to think with longer time horizons. We can't think in 10 years, 20 years. We need to think far longer than that. We need to think generational, like 40 years, right? And basically, you need visionary leadership that is anchored to a place over long periods of time to actually like build the new cities Africa needs to see. whether you're building from ground up or you're rebuilding a city, it takes this commitment over a long period of time. So the question now is, what will this visionary leadership provide, right, in these places, in these cities, over long periods of time to transform them to great cities? So yeah, so basically three things. I mean, there are more things that need to be provided, but I'm focusing on three things for this conversation. So the first is visionary leaders need to seed the cities of Africa with one, funding, number two, serendipity, and number three, resilience, right? And that's what I'm going to be unpacking in the next slide. All right. So the first is place anchored funding, right? I live and work in Ogbomoso. Ogbomoso is a secondary city in Nigeria, right? And it has a university of technology that basically has enabled it to grow over the past 2-3 decades. And the university attracts, amazing people from all over Nigeria. But one of the challenges is that people leave as fast as they graduate, right? So people graduate and then they leave. I'm one of the, how do I call it? Exceptions, right? So I concluded school and then I decided to remain back in Ogbomoso. And one of the things about, staying in Ogbomoso has been that you begin to realize that there are so many, critical factors that will be essential to be in place at the same time to get, the tides to turn, right? And it's like the chicken or the egg problem. Which one is first? Is it the chicken or the egg? And so over time, I've had to kind of like resolve the factors, the most important factors, right, to like about 3-4 bits. And one of them is place anchored funding. And for everyone on the call, like we're very familiar with, thematic funds and, founder-centric funds. So we have funds that are focused on specific thematic areas. Some are focused on edtech or on agriculture or on, on biodiversity or the green economy and all of that. And we have funds that are basically built around the founders themselves, right? But the question that began to kind of like surface in our minds as we began to think through what it takes to seed a city for greatness, to transform a city into a space where great things begin to happen, we realize that we might need to start thinking around having funds that are dedicated to cities. So I have three questions here that are meant to just, kickstart, our thinking, right, around this concept of place anchored funds. So how might we begin to think of setting up a portfolio of city funds? So instead of, setting up a fund that is focused on, let's say, AI startups, what about funds focused on like university towns, right? Or agricultural focused cities, right? I mean, like emergent cities that are basically built around agriculture. And then the idea is we're going to dedicate this fund to this city, and it will basically be to, get its agricultural ecosystem, thriving. So how might you begin to think of setting up a portfolio of city funds? Y Combinator right now has funded about 5,000 startups, and they are all valued at about $600 billion. So how do we look across the cities of Africa, for instance, and say, hey, we're going to be like setting up funds that will be dedicated to these cities for 20 years, for 30 years, and the goal is to actually transform the city. But then the question will be like, hey, how do we make returns from these funds? And so the idea is we can actually kill two birds with one stone. And that's we seed the emergence of new cities, or we build the potential of already existing ones. But then we can also make viable returns, right? Because so the other things I'm going to share will also help strengthen this particular idea of place anchored funding. The same way we bet on, the same way investment funds or venture capital funds bet on like making or arriving at a win, a single win from maybe about 100 companies in their portfolio, and they're betting on one or three, right? To actually give them all the returns on that fund. That's the same way we can think around, city funds. Like we dedicate funds to this city, and then projects in the city are funded by this fund. While a number of them might fail, we might have a 90%, failure rate and 85% failure rate. But the ones that win would, return all the funds we have actually, invested in that city. And then the third idea is, how might we adapt language created for the African startup landscape in describing the types of returns on such funds? So, the idea of, building unicorns and, exiting, on a very large scale, was a promise that, was brought into Africa as well. But time has shown us that, the unicorn is a very great idea to pursue, but that might not be ideal for Africa within this level of maturity of the ecosystem in Africa. So how might we, because sometimes the question will be, if we dedicate funds to cities, then, what kind of returns are we going to get? So we might need new language to actually begin to think through the kind of returns we get. So languages like gazelles or zebras or camels, that might not give, venture scale returns, but that can give significant returns that bring profit to, the investors, and at the same time, seed the economy for longer term results, right? So that's the idea of, place anchored funding. How do we set up funds that are dedicated to cities? How do we have, I don't want to use the popular names, for instance, right? But I have to use them because those might be the ones that we recognize, far easier. And so how might we have, let's say, a Nairobi focus fund, or an Ogbomoso focus fund, or an Aba focus fund in Nigeria, right? So we have an example of this, right now in Ogbomoso. So Ogbomoso, interestingly, has a king, and the king is a very forward-thinking king. He has a 25-year vision for the city. And so we are right now on the verge of setting up an Ogbomoso Enterprise Fund, and the pilot is meant to, kick off with about $1 million. And the idea for that is, okay, let's see what this dedicated fund is able to do, and then we can start scaling what's in that pool, to about $10 million and then above that. And the idea is, if we could have such funds across Africa that are dedicated, then what we see is we're going to see the rise, the emergence of amazing cities across the continent in no time. And then that leads me to the next quality, right, of, cities as innovation hubs. So the cities are serendipity engines. And there's this quote by Michael Natelli that is actually very amazing. I love this quote. It says, "We should all come home saying, you will never believe what happened today." The idea of, you just, stepping out at the beginning of the day, and then you come back home, and then you're buzzing with excitement because you met someone and the person shared the same ideas as you have always held for a long period of time. So I have someone on the call today, is Debo Thomas. So we basically met late last year, right? And in Ogbomoso, right? And he had been hearing about the things we do, and so some people have been trying to make introduction, and I also have been hearing about him for quite a while. But then we met last year, and it was like, wow, how could we have ever not met before now, right? And he's basically building a new city. It's called Valor City, and right, he's building out a new city in Ogbomoso, as it were. It's called Valor City, and it was just because there was this density of relationships that pulled us into each other's orbits that made it possible for us to, begin to discuss around the things he's doing and the things we're doing. So cities have the density that allow for serendipity to happen consistently. But then the question is, while those things could happen spontaneously, there might be the need for us to be more intentional in creating serendipity across the board in the cities we live in or the cities we try to build. So are there ways we can actually make that happen, right? Yes, there are. So every city has specific leverage points that involve relatively minimal investment and outsized returns. Examples are a tech hub and co-working space like CCO. Now, the tech scene in Nigeria was basically very, how do I call it? Very nascent, very non-obvious until Bosun Tijani, who is now the Minister for Information in Nigeria, and Femi Longet decided to start CCO in Yaba. And the moment they started CCO was just beside, or presently it's still beside University of Lagos and Yaba College of Technology, Yaba Tech. And from that place, so I call it a ground zero. From that place, people began to meet each other. So companies, startups began to emerge. And now the Nigerian tech ecosystem has become something that, inspires the entire continent. And that's because some people decided to establish a place that allowed for serendipity, that allowed for these meetings of bright minds that could build things together and, tackle challenges together. Another idea could be a new downtown, right? A lot of African emerging cities, like where I live, Ogbomoso, do not have a properly defined downtown, right? And that could be a way of seeding serendipity in these cities of Africa. Designing new spaces that allow convergence, right? Coffee shops, boutiques, cafes, innovation hubs, all of that together in very, close density with each other could actually lead to this idea of cities being, like engines of serendipity. It could also be a park, right? Places where people could just come cool off their minds. I was in New York last year, and there is a Central Park in New York that is actually a very significant spot that allows people to meet each other. People go, they take walks, they run, and all of that, and then they meet each other. And then the next thing is possibilities just break out. And sometimes it might not be spaces. It could be experiences like an annual conference. So an annual conference, for instance, could be the reason why serendipity emerges within a location, a city. And I'm using an example from Ogbomoso as well, right? So in 2022, we kickstarted what we call the Ogbomoso Digital Economy Summit that gathers together 1,500 stakeholders across the city. And this summit has become like the flagship or the most important economy event in Ogbomoso. And it has started pulling in the diaspora who are very interested in what's going on in the city. And some of them even are beginning to travel down to Ogbomoso for this event. Now, the summit has become an engine of serendipity. Like people who would otherwise not have met each other are beginning to meet each other, and partnerships are being struck, new projects are being executed, as it were. And then for a long period of time, we also observed that, for Ogbomoso to transition into like the potentials it has, we needed a convergence point, a physical space. And so we're building out a innovation cluster that is just a 2-minute walk from the university, which will have co-work spaces, incubation acceleration services, a conference hall, a maker space, and that's set to launch in June of this year. And then the third one and the final concept is ecosystems of resilience. So the idea is we need to build, and that's what basically innovation hubs do, right? When in the kind of like service they provide for entrepreneurs, creatives, and startups. The idea is to create like a community that increases the resilience of the founders, of the entrepreneurs, of the talents. And so when we think about the cities we're building in Africa and the new cities and also the already existing ones, we need to start thinking in the direction of Amazon, the Amazon rainforest type of diversity, and the starfish type of regenerative abilities, right? So the Amazon rainforest is basically the what's it called, the most diverse ecosystem in the world, right? With millions of species and the discovery of new species every 2 days. So every 2 days, new species are being discovered in the Amazon rainforest. And then the starfish. The starfish is like one of very few animals that can regenerate itself from cut limbs, right? So this is the five starfish, and this starfish can actually regenerate itself. If you cut away one of the arms, it can recreate itself, right? But it will take some time to do that, but it can. And the reason why it can do that is because its nervous system is decentralized across the entire body. So it's able to just like regenerate itself and have the complete version of itself over time. And this is what cities also do. What cities do is that they allow for you to pivot. They allow for you, because if this service doesn't work, there is this sufficient diversity in the city that allows for you to be able to pivot a service to, another set of people. It allows for you to, rethink what you've been doing and then like repurpose it and all of that. So when we think about how we approach the building of cities, we must think of diversity. We must be intentional about seeding diversity into the ecosystem. We must be careful not to only look for people that look like us, right? Because that's one of the things that lead to failures of projects like the building of cities. If we are homogeneous, then the likelihood of failure is very great, right? But when there is heterogeneity and diversity, then the possibilities of new versions, right? New models, new ideas, right? Just breaking out increases exponentially. And then when things happen to the ecosystem, there is this capacity to bounce back. But there is even a greater idea, and it's anti-fragility, right? And I have that title as anti-fragility is the new resilience, right? So Nassim Taleb was the one who actually brought this concept to the public consciousness, right? So there are fragile systems or ecosystems, fragile systems. There are robust systems, and then there are anti-fragile systems. And for fragile, any little stress just kind of like breaks it apart. But the robust systems are able to withstand. They're able to withstand like shocks. They're able to withstand stress. But they just remain the way they have always been. But anti-fragile systems actually not just withstand, but they actually benefit from the things that would normally have crushed other systems, other ecosystems. So it is a property of things that benefit from rather than merely withstand shocks, volatility, randomness, and stressors, ultimately becoming stronger and more capable as a result. So the idea around anti-fragility is what I've shared earlier, the Amazon rainforest type of diversity, and the starfish type of regenerative abilities. And the keys to anti-fragile cities are collaboration because of shared vision. Now I need to actually just emphasize a bit on this for us to kind of better understand the idea of collaboration around shared vision. One of the challenges we have, and it's a difficult challenge, is that a lot of times the scarcity mentality makes people think competition rather than collaboration. The idea that we have scarce resources, we can afford to open up what we are doing to other people. What this leads to is usually a case where people would rather shut themselves out of the possibilities of collaboration. And what that does is that there is no cohesion, there is no strength, right? There is no ecosystem in that sense of the word, right? But when there is a shared vision that everybody rallies around, and the ultimate good of the collective is amplified, what that does is that people will see the win of the ultimate of the collective as a win for themselves as well. And usually, like, the painting of shared vision is something that must, like, speak to the highest aspirations of people. And at the same time, it must be spoken in the language of, of people. So, it's one thing to build a new city that is built around a theme or around, a set of people. But when you're thinking about already existing, cities, then you have to think about the cross section of people, right, in that city. So we have the elites, we have the upwardly mobile, we have the, those who are down and out, who are, still struggling to make ends meet. So the question is, how can we develop shared vision that actually captures the attention of everyone, right? Like, in that, in that city, right? So it is when we have such shared vision that would be very confident that, there will be no groups of people excluded who would not see anything wrong in sabotaging all the efforts of the other people for whom things are working. Recently, recently there have been reports out of San Francisco and, uh, California, and also like the Valley, Silicon Valley, and the challenge has been the question of there is this widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. And so the have-nots are feeling like, well, like, I have nothing to lose. And so if I do damage to infrastructure, well, I don't have anything to lose. And I think that's one of the, like, projects Gary Tan of Y Combinator is really, really working on at the moment. How do we include everybody in the city or in this location for everyone to see that, hey, like, the ultimate good of everyone is what is being pursued here. So we need to collaborate around shared visions. We need to have compelling visions that are strong enough to hold the attention of the elite as well as the down and out. And also decentralization. So the idea is, how do we ensure that when something starts in, let's say, a Yaba, for instance, it does not stop in a Yaba. So I'll give an example with Ogbomoso, where, I live. Ogbomoso has 5 local government areas. The most developed local government area is the Ogbomoso North local government area. And so the tendency is very strong that all the attention will be placed on just that, local government area that has, all the potentials and all of that. But the idea we've been actually, like, working around with at this time is, how might we actually help to seed other parts of the city, right, with the same things that made this local government, this Ogbomoso North local government, that made it, attractive to investors, that made it attractive to, people. How might we also seed other locations around Ogbomoso North with these possibilities as well? How might we get, exceptional people to go build there, but with all the support that they need from those in the North? And this is very important because, again, as I mentioned earlier, when people feel excluded, right, from the growth, the development of a city, then they do not mind vandalizing and sabotaging all that is going on in it. And that's why this is very important. How do we decentralize opportunity beyond where it's already concentrated? How do we create opportunities for diffusion from places of higher concentration to places of lower concentration? And so these are the thoughts that have been, going through our minds as we've been, using Ogbomoso as our live experiment of how to transform an entire city into an innovation hub where things are, where things are, where great things are happening, where people are interested in staying back and interested in building things, interested in building their families, where people are able to meet people like them, people who share the same ambitions like them. And when they don't feel like they are the only ones, like, am I the only one dreaming this big in this community? So they can meet people like them who actually share the same aspirations as they do. And they also realize that, hey, I can build from out of here and I can be as big as I need to be, or as I want to be, without needing to migrate out of my city. And as we begin to think about all of these three, concepts together: place anchored funding, serendipity engines, and ecosystems of resilience, then I feel we have a template that can be used to actually build out the new cities Africa needs in these times. So I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, JD. We appreciate it. I thought it was a fantastic presentation. I think we'll open the floor for discussion. Does anyone want to go ahead and lead off with a question? If not, I'll go ahead and I'll start. So JD, in your perception, what do you think is going to be the most difficult problem to deal with when sort of creating these new environments?
Yeah, I would say that it is getting the buy-in that you need at the inception, right? It takes a level of conviction, right, to actually like provoke interest in people who have maybe seen it all, right? They've seen a lot of lofty ideas shared over the years, over the decades, and they've seen them fail. So for you to actually like get the buy-in, like there must be a significant level of conviction, and then there must be, how do I call it, like a nucleus of people that kind of like, again, form what I call visionary leadership. These people are willing to walk the talk, right? They're willing to be the ones who, put their money where their mouth is. They're willing to actually like, plant roots deep enough in these cities. So they're not the first to, like escape the city when things do not seem to be going well. They're willing to stay. And so people see them, and they believe that if these people could be this convinced, then I think I also should start, believing them. I'll use an example from my experience, right? As far back as 2016, I had people come to Ogbomoso to come buy acres of property, right? Because as I shared with them the vision for Ogbomoso, they were like, man, like, I think we need to come, like invest here before the things you were talking about begin to materialize, and then things get so expensive we don't have a stake in this city. So I feel like that's very, very important as a first thing to attend to in the difficulties you might face there.
Heba, you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you, Dee, for the very interesting presentation. I have a very specific question, just because you mentioned the King Fund somewhere in Nigeria, where a traditional leader, I think, put together some funds for his community. I wanted to ask if you have any other examples of traditional leaders in Africa capturing or putting some mechanisms for land capture, using the land, selling the land to actually raise that funds and then reinvesting that into their own communities. It's just something that we're really interested in, and I wanted to pick up your brain on that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Eba. So I there's one specific example, but I can't remember the name of the tribe now. So there is this community in South Africa that actually does the same thing, right? So I was in South Africa last year, and I happened to meet one of them, right? And he mentioned like what their community had done. So I think they found some like mineral resources in their community, and so the mineral resources, after they started getting mined, the funds from the sales of the resources were funneled into a fund for the community. And the fund is a multi-generation fund. I think the way the fund has been structured, it should be able to last about 100 years or something, if I remember very correctly. Yeah. And I feel I will get the name and maybe share with Siska, and then she can, forward to everyone. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Angela, you have a question.
Yeah, just really incredible presentation. It really resonated with a lot of the work that we do as well, and just really appreciate the time. And I have a ton of questions that I might follow up later. And if there's a way to share contact info from the folks on the video, that'd be great. But specifically around that, the city fund, the enterprise fund, how are you kind of viewing that, like structurally? Like, would it be all venture, or would you use it like a combination of venture, real estate, maybe small business? Like, how accessible is it for the community to own a piece of it, right? Like kind of buying the block for, we think of the concept a lot of Build of like, you're literally city equity fund that everybody has access to, right? Even a small couple shares, all the way to the more kind of strategic capital. So how do you view that structurally? And, maybe where do you see it in like, what's the ideal scenario when it's, what does that look like in like, 10 to 20 years?
Right. Thanks, Angelo. So we're still working through the details, but this is how we're thinking about it. So the fund will be accessible to different strata of the community. So it's not just venture. So it's also small businesses, social enterprises. The basic, because sometimes you may not be able to get venture scale returns if you have not yet seeded the ecosystem to be able to support that. So some of the fund may go into education and all of that. But the idea is that Ogbomoso citizens in the diaspora, those who are living in the West, they're able to kind of bring in funds. So the idea is the $1 million will be broken into units. And so you can subscribe, to a unit. Maybe a unit is $5,000 or a unit is $1,000, right? So you can subscribe to 10 units of that. And so the returns on the funds will be returned to you based on how many units you actually have within the pool. So again, we are still having conversations around, how to structure this pilot fund. And we're very glad to share our learnings as, things, kickstart. Yeah.
We have another question. Zanzibar Startup.
Yeah, thank you. I'm about to run. I have another meeting, but I'd just like to know a few things. First of all, I know you're still in the pilot stage, but I wanted to know is like, how are you managing the fund? Is there any involvement with the city council, or I don't know the setup in Nigeria or the local government, and how does that work in the fund that you're trying to set up? But also, how is their involvement in terms of you trying to build this ecosystem in the city, like in terms of the government, especially the local government within the city, or what's their role in all of this?
Okay, so the interesting thing is that, this is me just saying this off the record. So a lot of times the government in Nigeria only catches on some things after the fact, right? So it's not so much of a government centered thing. It's more private, and then so the king is. So the cultural structure is that you have kings in different localities in Nigeria, and these kings, even though they are installed by the state government, they can do things independent of the state government, right? So it is the private sector in Ogbomoso and then the palace of the king that are coming together to actually make this fund happen. So but we know that as time goes on, as the fund grows bigger, then there will be the need to actually ensure that we align with regulations and all of that. But right now, it's just still something small that is not on the radar of the government. Yeah.
Nella had a question.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Really, I think it's aligned with just future of cities and even just sustainability as well. So my question was in relation to the place anchored funding. I just wanted to know it's a different approach to sort of going through the traditional route. And I think when focusing on a specific place or a city, it's very different. Like just the mindset is different from, say, if you're focusing on an industry like maybe AI or something specific. It's broader. But so question is, how has the reception been in terms of like stakeholders, not necessarily just government, but like individuals, and has going through the traditional route played a role in, like, has it changed or made it easier in terms of getting that buy-in as opposed to maybe choosing to go through government or directly a VC interaction with stakeholders? I'm just curious to know things.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Nella. So the interesting thing is, it's very, very rare for you to see a king in Nigeria having a 25-year vision, right? And the vision is around the city. And so, first of all, I think the idea of the fund has gotten significant interest because of the idea of longevity, the sense of, certainty that comes with, okay, a king like rules throughout the entire lifetime, right? Not a government that is changed every 4 years. So there is a sense of continuity and, certainty that comes from this being something that, the king's 25-year vision is, supported. So the buy-in has been quite interesting. Very interesting. So I would say that that's one of the advantages of having a leader who has influence and who is kind of like, reflected and who is visionary. And then you have people around him who want to actually see the success of his vision for the 25 years. Yeah. So I would say that's been the context around the receptivity of people to it.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Excellent. I think that kind of brings us to time. So I'll say, go ahead and say thank you, JD, very much for the presentation. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.